Welcome, wonderful students, to Lesson 8 in the Changing Economic World topic in GCSE Geography. In this series of 4 lessons, I'm going to be showing you one of the key questions in all of geography and one of the most important issues today, which is, why are some countries richer than others? Why are the lives of people in some countries easier than the lives of others? What has happened over the past and today, and what continues to happen that prevents some countries from being as developed as others? I'm going to show you a series of causes over the next 4 lessons, which will explain why some countries remain LICs and how other countries have become HICs. Please take a moment to write the date, title, and learning objective. It's time for recall. Write 1 to 12, answer the questions, and then check your answers. Go time. Let's review. Number 1. What continent has the highest percent of LICs? That is Africa. Number 2. The primary sector is largest in HICs, NEEs, or LICs. It is LICs. Number 3. People are more highly educated in HICs, so the tertiary sector is largest. 4. In LICs, most people live in rural areas in the primary sector. Number 5. Teachers, doctors and lawyers are all jobs in the tertiary sector. They provide a service for people. 6. A NEE is a middle-income country with a global average GDP per capita of $11,000. 7. In NEEs, the secondary sector, manufacturing, is growing rapidly and providing a large percent of the country's GDP. 8. In NEEs, many people are moving from rural areas to urban areas in search of better paid jobs. 9. In LICs, a large percent of people work in the primary sector as low-paid farmers or miners. 10. HICs, like the USA, have a global average income of $39,000. What sector makes up the largest percent of employment? It's the tertiary sector, services, mostly in cities. 11. A newly emerging economy has an average GDP per capita of $11,000. 12. Stage 2 in the DTM has the fastest population growth. Please give yourselves a mark out of 12. If you scored below 10, then come back to this quiz in a week and take the test again. If you scored 10 or above, fantastic, you're really understanding this now. That's excellent. Let's move forwards. Time to tackle this big question. Why are some countries richer than others? I'm going to show you 2 photos to introduce this idea. And alongside those photos, I'm going to show you 3 questions. Take a minute to attempt to answer these 3 questions to see if you can understand the first reason why some countries are richer than others. Here are your photos, 2 different countries, and here are your 3 questions. Take a minute, answer the questions. Number 1, what are the differences in climate between the 2 places? If you remember, the climate of a place is the average pattern of rainfall and temperature in a place over a long period of time. So, is a place usually hot or cold? Is a place usually wet or dry? This place here, a country called Mali in West Africa, you would say has a hot and dry climate. You can tell this from the crops and how they are dried out. This we might call a drought, a lack of rain over a long period of time. This place here, this is the UK, you can probably say that it's slightly cooler. Well, you know that the UK is cooler, and certainly that there's a lot more rainfall. Not only can you tell because of the clouds, but also because there's greenery here. Which country is likely to be more developed and why? Well, if you didn't know what these countries are, you might have said this country is likely to be more developed because the climate makes farming easier, and so they can grow more crops, and so people are better fed. But also, because farmers can grow more crops, they can sell more and therefore have a higher income, which they can spend on things like education, healthcare, and other equipment, so that farming is easier. Question 3. How could you measure the difference in development between these 2 places? Well, throughout this topic, we've been talking about the measures of development. So you might say the literacy rate, you could measure that. You might have said the life expectancy, or the GDP per capita, or the birth rate, or the death rate, or the infant mortality rate. Any of these measures of development could be used to work out the differences between these two places. If you were very advanced and you had a very good understanding, you could have said the Human Development Index, which, as you know, is better than any single measure. These photos show the first cause of the development gap, which I'm going to explain today. These are the physical causes, the natural differences between countries around the world, which explain why some people's lives are better than others. So, game time. What are the physical causes of the development gap? Write this as a subtitle at the top of your page or in your book, and let's get ready to understand the two main physical causes. The first one I've already introduced you to. Here we go. The first physical cause is the climate of a place. The climates of different countries are different around the world. Some places have hot climates, some places have cold, some places have wetter climates, some places have drier climates. This affects their development. Let me show you two examples to help you understand this. Here is a country called Mali in West Africa. As you can see, much of Mali is in the Sahara Desert. This means that it has a really hot, dry climate. This lady here is a typical farmer in Mali. She works extremely hard and long hours every day with many children to grow crops for her family to be able to survive. Any extra crops that she grows, she sells to make an income. However, the climate is working against her. There are long periods of time without rainfall in Mali, and there is intense heat, being near the Sahara Desert. Both of these things mean that she's unable to grow a large quantity of crops every year. We say that her crop yield is quite low. The crop yield is the amount of crops that a farmer grows in a year. Because the crop yield is low in a country like Mali with its hot, dry climate, the farmer, like this lady, can make only a low income. But also, she's only able to grow a small amount of food. Here they're growing corn. As a result, there is not very much food for the people to eat, which means they lack energy to be able to grow and get stronger and develop physically, and also the energy to work. And so because they are less able to work and because they're less healthy, they are both more likely to be ill and less productive, which means they can make less money. So the first problem that climate creates is an inability to farm. It makes farming very difficult, which is especially important in an LIC like Mali because most people are farmers. As a result, Mali is very poor. The second way that climate works against a country like Mali is this. A hot climate is perfect for insects to survive. And insects like this mosquito are a key cause of the spread of infectious diseases. An infectious disease is one that can spread between people or between animals and people. A disease called malaria, which is spread by mosquitoes, kills more than 1 million people a year. And many of those people are in Africa. And they're in Africa because African countries have a hot and often wet climate. Mosquitoes love this because they need this climate to survive. As a result, many people die in Mali every year from diseases like malaria. And if they don't die, they are very ill, which means, again, they are unable to work. If the parents are unable to work, they can't provide food or education or healthcare for their children, which means their children are less likely to grow up and be educated and get good jobs. And so the poverty, not having money, continues. So the second way that climate keeps a country in LIC is because hot, dry and hot, wet climates are perfect for the spread of diseases, infectious diseases, spread by insects like mosquitoes. Let's compare Mali to a country like the UK. In the UK, this farmer, his name is Alan, is very successful. One of the crops he grows is potatoes, another is lettuce, and he sells almost all of his crops to supermarkets in the UK and makes a large income from it. Because of the climate of the UK, which is not very hot but not very cold, and which has regular rainfall, Alan here is able to grow a lot of crops every year. He has a high crop yield, and as a result his income is much higher than this lady in Mali. So the climate in the UK, being mild, not too hot, and quite wet, allows farmers to have a higher income because they have a higher crop yield. The climate of the UK helps crops grow. Here is a typical day in the UK, and the fields grow very well. Because the farmers make a lot of income, they're able to spend money buying, for example, tractors, which allows them to grow yet more crops. And they're able to spend money on their kids' education, so that kids can grow up and get excellent jobs, higher paid jobs. All of this works together to make the UK an HIC. But there's another way that the climate helps the UK. Every winter in the UK we have a situation like this. Now you might say, but sir, I haven't seen snow for so long, and you'd be right, it is becoming less frequent. But either way, we have very cold winters in the UK. As a result, insects like the mosquito that would normally spread disease die out. And because they die out, we have fewer infectious diseases in the UK, which means that we're ill less often. And so we're more productive, we're able to work more, and we're able to go to school more. So we get more educated and we get better jobs and we earn a higher income. Our GDP per capita and our literacy rate and our life expectancy go up compared to a country like Mali, which has infectious diseases. So for these two reasons, the climate has made the UK an HIC and Mali an LIC. The first physical cause of the development gap is the climate and differences in climate. Second physical cause, natural disasters. Right, this is a subtitle. Natural disasters do not happen as often everywhere around the world. They are unevenly distributed, which means some places get more natural disasters than others. As a result, life is easier in some places than others. It's easier to develop. Let me show you two examples. This is Nepal in Asia, an LIC that you may have learned about in the context of an earthquake. In 2015, a massive earthquake hit Nepal, and it caused damage like this. This gentleman here is a businessman in Kathmandu, the capital city. He was actually relatively successful. He was setting up a small clothing factory in the capital city, and he had about 9 workers making clothes every year to sell to people in the city. He made a good income, much higher than the average income in Nepal. In fact, he made a high enough income to invest, which means buy, another building so that he could set up another factory. He had great plans for the future, and he imagined hiring more people and being able to send his kids to better schools, perhaps even in another country, and getting richer. However, all those plans came tumbling down in 2015. The earthquake destroyed his new factory and his old one. 6 of his workers were trapped in the rubble and died tragically. The future of this man's business disappeared before his eyes. He was lucky enough to survive, but his business wasn't. Nepal is an LIC largely because it experiences a lot of earthquakes. Earthquakes prevent Nepal's development for 2 reasons. Number 1, they destroy infrastructure. Infrastructure is everything you see in this picture except for the people. It's the electricity cables, it's the buildings, it's the roads. When buildings are destroyed, businesses are destroyed, and so people lose money. When electricity cables are destroyed, again, it's difficult to communicate, and also businesses rely on electricity. When roads are blocked, people can't travel around to work, for example. It's hard to reach people. Because businesses and buildings are quite expensive, Nepal then needs to spend a lot of money, which it often gets from aid from other countries, to repair and reconstruct. All of this money could have been spent on development, on schools or hospitals, on building new factories. Instead, it's spent on repairs. And that prevents Nepal from developing. The second reason that natural disasters hold back development is that they kill people. The workforce, they're the people who work. All the money in a country comes from people working. And if the people die, the doctors, the teachers, the lawyers, the bankers, the factory workers, if they die, then the country loses money. It no longer has workers to build schools. It no longer has teachers to educate the people. It no longer has as many doctors to treat people who are ill, so fewer people can work. As a result of people dying, the country is held back from developing as well. So natural disasters are terrible for countries' development. They hold Nepal back from becoming an HIC. Let's look at a contrasting, which means a different example. Here is a fairly well-known flour mill in a town called Ashford in southeast England in Kent. It's made of brick, and the owner and the family that have owned this flour mill have owned it for more than 100 years. And as a result, they've been a very successful business family. The kids now go to private schools, and the family are well known. They live in a big country house. And this has all been possible because of a lack of natural disasters in Britain. You will notice that this building is made of brick, similar to the material in these buildings. And yet the people in England who built this have no need to worry because there are no earthquakes in England. And as a result, when the people built this, they knew that they would continue to make an income from it in the future. They could plan their future because no earthquakes would bring it down. And as such, the parents who owned this factory were able to send their kids to private school. And they were able to invest in a new factory, in supplies. They were able to invest in a bigger house. They knew that their income would continue because natural disasters wouldn't stop it. So the UK is an HIC partly because we have very few natural disasters that are expensive or that kill people. We can plan our future. Think about this example. Many of your parents of you students that are watching will have a mortgage on their house. That mortgage is a payment that they pay to a bank every month. The bank only gives mortgages to people that it knows will be able to pay them every month. And banks in the UK know people can pay their mortgage because generally people have reliable incomes from their jobs. One reason why incomes are reliable is because there are no natural disasters to kill the people who work and make the income, and there are no natural disasters to destroy the businesses of the people. As a result, the people are able in the UK to get mortgages on houses. They know the income will allow them to pay for the house. In Nepal, it's much more difficult because you can't plan for your future because an earthquake may literally bring it tumbling down. So the second physical cause of the development gap is the uneven distribution of natural disasters around the world. Tropical storms affect some countries more than others. Earthquakes and volcanoes affect some countries more than others. As a result, some countries like Nepal are more likely to remain LICs, whereas other countries like the UK are more likely to become HICs. This has been a fairly complex and sophisticated explanation, so it's time to test your understanding. If you have a whiteboard, fantastic. If not, take a sheet of paper and answer these questions. Number 1. What is a crop yield? A crop yield is the amount, measured in tons, of crops that a farmer grows every year. Number 2. How might the climate of a country affect the crop yield of its farmers? If a country has a hot, dry climate, this may lead to a lower crop yield because crops do not grow as well in such climates. By contrast, if a country has a mild climate, such as in the UK, the crop yield may be higher because these provide ideal conditions for crops to grow. Question 3. Give me one reason why Mali is likely to be an LIC right now, one physical cause. You may have said that Mali's climate prevents its farmers from being able to make a good income, and also prevents the people from having a good quality food supply. You may have also said that Mali's climate allows diseases to spread, infectious diseases, because the climate is perfect for insects like mosquitoes to spread such diseases. Question 4. What do you know about the distribution of natural hazards around the world, and how does that affect the development in countries? Natural hazards like earthquakes, volcanoes, tropical storms are unevenly distributed around the world, you should have said. This means that some places are less likely to be affected both economically, in terms of cost and damage, and in terms of human effect, loss of life, than other places. Countries in the world with fewer natural hazards are more likely to become HICs than countries with more natural hazards. Question 5. Countries that may be LICs because of the natural hazards they experience. You should have said Mali in West Africa and Nepal in Asia. Give one reason why a businessman in Kathmandu in Nepal might struggle to plan for the future and may not want to invest a lot of his money in a new factory. A businessman or businesswoman may not want to invest in the future because it's risky. It's risky because an earthquake may destroy the new factory and therefore destroy his income or her income. And as such, they would have spent a lot of money on this factory and it would have all been lost. Finally, question 6. Give 3 social measures of development that are likely to be lower in an LIC like Mali than an HIC like the UK as a result of natural disasters. 3 social measures. You should have said life expectancy, literacy rate, or doctors per 1,000 people. Okay, consolidation. Big practice question to help you really understand and remember this. Write this question as a title. It's exactly how it would appear in the exam. Use the keywords that I've given you. Answer the question and then check your answers against my notes. Okay, here's the question. Write it as a title. Let's have a look at the answer, or a possible series of points that you may have made. Okay, it's less important that you work out exactly how many marks you got, and more important that you use the keywords correctly so that you constructed an accurate explanation. So, key ideas you may have had. First one, figure 1 shows a drought, which means an extended period with little precipitation in Mali. Very important in a question like this where it says using figure 1 or using figure, that you start your idea with figure 1 shows. That tells the examiner you know you're using the figure and you're going to get the marks. This has occurred because Mali has a semi-arid, good keyword here, which means hot and dry climate. Then you have to explain how it causes the development gap. So the effect of this climate would mean reduced crop yields as crops such as maize struggle to grow. As such, farmers would have a reduced income and therefore would be less able to invest, which means spend money on, in education and medicines for their families, which would further reduce their income. Also, the lack of food would mean people lack the physical energy to grow, work, and study, so their education would be negatively affected. As a result of poor education and healthcare, you could have extended this to say they'd be less able to get high-paid jobs, again holding back development. Finally, you could have said, and this is important because it's the development gap, remember the differences between countries. By contrast, in the UK, the climate is mild, which increases crop yields, leading to higher incomes, more food, and therefore better health, education, and jobs. So look at the 3 things I've done. I've said figure 1, it says use figure 1. I've explained the effect of this problem, drought, but I've also explained how it caused the development gap, which means the difference between countries. So I've talked about Mali and I've talked about the UK. Finally, let's capture our learning into 2 questions that I would like you to come up with from memory. Write the questions, write the answers, test yourself. Students, I'm so impressed that you've joined me for another lesson. If you're here, that means your attitude to learning is fantastic. Keep this up and I promise you, you will do excellently. For the next 3 lessons, we are going to continue to develop our understanding of why some countries are richer than others. Join me then. Well done.